On the morning of May 9, 2017, a radiation control technician walking a routine patrol at the Hanford nuclear site in Washington state stopped at a patch of ground that looked wrong. The soil above a buried railroad tunnel had sunk 4 feet overnight. At 8:26 in the morning, sirens sounded across the most contaminated place in America, and thousands of workers got the same order. Take cover, stay inside, do not eat, do not drink, because under that sunken ground sat a train. 8 railcars, loaded and sealed in the dark since 1965. But the roof above them had just given way. We need to be clear about what was on those railcars, because this is the part that sounds invented, and it is not. Every car carried equipment from a plutonium factory. Steel vessels so radioactive that the engineers who ran the place said a person standing next to them would not survive the exposure. The government measured some of those objects at 40,000 curies. For comparison, the radiation source in a hospital cancer machine is a fraction of that, and it sits behind lead walls with warning lights. These things sat on flat cars under 8 feet of dirt, held up by wooden beams from the Eisenhower era. And on that May morning in 2017, somewhere along a 358-foot tunnel, those beams finally quit. The hole in the desert floor measured 19 by 17 feet, big enough to swallow a pickup truck. Crews flying drones over the breach could see straight down into the dark, onto the roof of a railcar that had not felt sunlight in over half a century. The no-fly zone went up the same day. Officials counted heads and held their breath, waiting for the radiation monitors to spike. They did not spike. Not that day. And how close it came, we will get to. Because to understand why America built a railroad to nowhere, loaded a train it could never touch again, and buried it alive in the desert, we have to go back to the place where the atomic age was born. Hanford sits on the Columbia River in southeastern Washington, 586 square miles of sagebrush that the Army seized in 1943 for the Manhattan Project. The government evicted the farm towns of Hanford and White Bluffs, brought in 50,000 workers, and built a city of secrets. The B reactor they raised there was the first full-scale plutonium production reactor on Earth. The plutonium for the Trinity test came out of this place. So did the core of the Fat Man bomb that fell on Nagasaki. If you want to see how deep this story goes, hit like and subscribe, because what they built after the war is the part almost nobody talks about. In 1956, at the center of the site, they finished a building called PUREX, Plutonium-Uranium Extraction. It is 1,005 feet long, longer than 3 football fields laid end to end, standing 64 feet above the ground and reaching another 40 feet below it. Inside, behind concrete walls thicker than a man is tall, remote manipulators dissolved irradiated fuel rods in nitric acid and pulled the plutonium out. Historian Michelle Gerber, who wrote the definitive history of this place, found that President Eisenhower called it Project X, his #1 priority. In 1 month, PUREX could do what a World War II plant needed 26 months to do. More plutonium passed through this single building than any other structure on the planet. But a machine that dissolves metal in boiling acid is also dissolving itself. And that created a problem nobody had ever faced before. Inside PUREX, the dissolvers, the extraction columns, the tanks and condensers corroded and failed, one after another. Don Wadrich, a mechanical engineer who spent about 40 years supporting this plant, explained the routine. When a piece of equipment failed, crews removed it remotely, put it in a concrete box, set the box on a rail car, and hauled it to a burial ground. Standard procedure, grim but manageable. Then the big vessels started dying, and for the largest, hottest pieces of equipment, Wadrich said there was no box big enough to hold them and still fit out the tunnel. The radiation coming off that steel meant no crew could ride with it, no yard could store it, no crane operator could work near it for long. The equipment could not leave. So the engineers flipped the problem on its head. If the failed machines could not go to the burial ground would come to them. Starting in 1954, crews built a railroad tunnel directly off the end of the PUREX building. Not a tunnel through a mountain. A tunnel they dug as a trench and then roofed over with 12 by 14-inch creosote-treated Douglas fir timbers, tar paper on top, and 8 feet of earth shoveled over the whole thing. A wooden cellar, 358 feet long, with train tracks running into it. The tracks sloped downward, 1% grade, into the dark. Here is where this story leaves every other railroad story we have ever covered. Between June of 1960 and January of 1965, a locomotive pushed 8 railcars loaded with failed plutonium equipment down that slope and into that tunnel, and no human being was aboard. The engine was operated by remote control. No engineer in the cab, no brake mapping on the cars, because the cargo would have killed them. Crews uncoupled remotely, backed the engine out, and left the cars standing in the dark. 8 times over 5 years. Then in 1965, they sealed the entrance, a massive door that had been filled with water for radiation shielding while the tunnel operated, and they walked away. Think about what that means for a second. We have covered machines abandoned in floods, buried by volcanoes, drowned in the sea. This is the only fleet we have ever found that was buried alive on purpose by its own railroad, because touching it was a death sentence. And Hanford was not done. The equipment kept failing. So in 1964, they built Tunnel 2 right alongside, and this one shows you the government knew the first tunnel was a mistake. No wood this time. Steel arches and concrete, 1,688 feet long, room for 40 cars. For the next 3 decades, into the 1990s, the remote engine kept making its one-way deliveries. By the time PUREX shut down for good, and the second tunnel was sealed in 1996, 28 more railcars stood inside it. 36 cars total, parked in the dark. Government scientists later estimated the cargo in Tunnel 2 alone at roughly 500,000 curies. If you are wondering what a number like that even means, stay with us, because the men who understood it best spent decades shouting into the void. In 1980, a Department of Energy expert named G.R. Sylvan put a warning on paper. His report concluded the wooden tunnel was sound for the present, assuming nothing changed. But he added a sentence that reads today like a prophecy. If the contents of that tunnel ever had to come out, do it soon, while the structure could still survive the removal operation. Translation: the clock on those timbers was running. The report was filed. The tunnel stayed sealed. Sylvan's warning aged in a cabinet, while the Douglas fir above the train aged under the dirt. Michel Gerber put it bluntly decades later. Radiation breaks down materials. It breaks down wood, causes it to decay and collapse. In her words, it was obviously a very poor construction method, something we would never do today. A 2015 university risk study went further, warning that a strong earthquake could bring down the PUREX building and both tunnels and deliver a lethal dose to unprotected workers nearby. That study was 2 years old, sitting in the record, when the technician found the sunken ground. So on May 9, 2017, the thing the paperwork had predicted for 37 years finally happened, quietly, on a Tuesday. The timbers over Tunnel 1 gave way near where the 2 tunnels join. Workers had walked that ground 5 days earlier and seen nothing. Now there was a hole you could drop a truck through, and the hottest train in America lay open to the sky. The response tells you everything about what was down there. The emergency center activated at 8:26 in the morning. Take cover orders went across the site. Reported numbers on how many workers sheltered that day range from a few hundred nearby to several thousand across the site, and we flag that spread honestly because the official accounts differ. Non-essential staff went home. Planes were banned overhead. Robots and drones went where people could not. And then, a strange kind of luck. The monitors stayed quiet. The collapsed dirt had fallen onto the cars and sealed them like a lid. The Energy Secretary announced that by 11 the next morning, crews had dumped more than 50 truckloads of soil into the breach and closed it. 50 truckloads to plug the hole. That was the easy part. The hard question came next, and the government's own investigators later put a price on the whole emergency, about $10 million. Here is the detail that made our jaw drop when we pulled the federal audit. No formal accident investigation was ever triggered because the event technically did not meet the cost threshold that requires one. The fix they chose sounds like something out of a pharaoh's playbook. If the train could not come out, the tunnel would become a tomb. Through late 2017, engineers pumped roughly 6,000 cubic yards of engineered grout into Tunnel 1, around 650 truckloads of flowable concrete slurry, filling every void around those 8 railcars until train and tunnel became a single solid block underground. Then cameras went into Tunnel 2, and what they saw ended the debate. Between October of 2018 and April of 2019, through a winter of record snowfall, nearly 40,000 cubic yards of grout went into the long tunnel. About 4,000 truckloads. Somewhere under that concrete, 28 railcars stand in their final positions, bumper to bumper in the dark, exactly where the remote engine left them. And this is where we owe you the honest version, because most coverage gets it wrong. The grout was deliberately engineered so it could one day be sawed into blocks and hauled out. The government has not decided whether these trains are buried forever or just for now. That decision is still open as we speak, tangled in a cleanup that the Department of Energy now prices between $364 billion and $589 billion, running until at least 2086. Men not yet born will manage the tomb of a train that last moved when Lyndon Johnson was president. One more thing survived, and this is the part we did not expect to find. Not everything on Hanford's rails went into the tunnels. 16 contaminated cars sat for decades on a lonely spur called 212R, along with 2 diesel locomotives, 125-ton Alco machines bought new by the Atomic Energy Commission in 1948. Those 2 engines spent their entire working lives inside this fence, hauling irradiated fuel between reactors. When cleanup crews finally reached them, they ran more than 2,000 contamination surveys on the locomotives, and the machines came back clean enough to save. In 2011, both engines and 2 of their shielded cask cars rolled one last time to the B reactor, where they sit on display today. You can stand next to them on a public tour. 2 survivors of a fleet whose brothers are entombed in concrete a few miles away. And we checked. They are still there. So what did all of it cost? A wooden tunnel that saved money in 1956 and produced a $10 million emergency in 2017. 46,000 cubic yards of concrete to bury 36 railcars that were only ever supposed to wait there, temporarily. A warning written in 1980 that came true almost to the letter, 37 years later. The men who loaded that train were never named in any record we could find, because the whole point of the operation was that no man ever stood close enough to sign his work. The machines. America is proudest of get museums. The ones it fears get 8 feet of dirt and 4,000 trucks of concrete. Somewhere under the sagebrush in Washington state, a train still stands on its rails, headlights toward a door that will probably never open again. If this story got under your skin the way it got under ours, hit subscribe, because we dig up the machines. America buried and forgot, and this one will not be the last. And tell us in the comments, if the day ever comes, should those 36 rail cars be cut out of the concrete and hauled away, or should the tomb stay sealed? Drop your take below. We read every comment, and somebody down there always knows more than the record shows. Click, and we see you in the next one now.